Welcome back, everybody, to another meta update. My name is Joshua Joshi Howard, and today we're going to be going over a very long, very large weekend that we saw coming out this last week. Because there were basically no events on Valentine's Day weekend, we had double the normal number of players that are actually coming out for a bunch of singles events. We also had Pyra Cup happening over the last weekend, so we'll be talking about that as well. This is coming out a little bit later because I had a scrim going on earlier today that took longer than I expected it to. So, for any of you guys who are like in Asia or whatever, and we're not getting it all on Monday for you guys, well, sorry, that's going to happen sometimes. I am what I am. Let's go ahead and start taking a look at the brief meta snapshot. We had a 54.9% win rate over more than 500 games this last weekend. So this is, we're really getting into meaningful sample sizes at this point. The Grizzled win rate is still really, really good, hovering around 54 to 55%. And this weekend, we had a, pretty normal average ELO of 1551 and a median of 1509. We had 102 players playing singles this last weekend. So like I said, it was double what we oftentimes see. Usually we're like, mid 40s to low 50s is what we're usually seeing for most weekends. So the fact that we are close to double that is really, really big. There was a lot going on. There were a lot of events kind of around the world, and we'll go ahead and talk about them. It is worth noting that at this point, you should expect that most events, maybe not all, but a large majority of the events will be using the nerf to Grizzled, where we no longer have access to the reroll once to wound if our opponent is on an objective. And realistically, it doesn't look like it's changed much. We're seeing a couple of people going back to combined a little bit, especially if they're playing really open boards. I do think combined has a slightly better time into like Necrons, which are kind of the big bad right now, but it's not necessarily going to be the same kind of around the world, or it depends on like what's going to be in your meta, whether or not you feel like you need to skew against Necrons or take some things that are going to be playing better on other boards. Let's go ahead and get right into it, though. We're going to start off with Pyra Cup. So if you aren't familiar, Pyra Cup is an event that happens every year where they invite, basically you start with like the teams that did the best at the WTC, and you just go down the list of how well you did until you have enough teams to fill out 8 teams. Poland will get 2, and you'll get 6 other national teams from mostly around Europe, but oftentimes also the United States as well. Guard did poorly at this event, which is a like kind of surprising, but also kind of not when you look at the people who were actually going to this event. It was a lot of people who are not historically guard players, and guard is very, very good, yes, but a lot of people look at guard and they think it's easy. There's not a whole lot that you need to know about this army. And that is just plainly not true. Every single time we see this, every single time we see people hopping over from other factions to guard if they weren't a guard player before, if they haven't played guard in the past, they don't have a lot of success. And I think this is a really good example of, especially if you're going to be playing in like teams environments, either get somebody that plays that faction or get your players to play the factions that they're good at, because guard was a significant liability at Pyra Cup with one exception. And let's go ahead and get right into it. First one is Wesley St. Hines. He was playing Recon Element for Team USA. He went 5-0, dropping only 2, 3, 8 points across the entire event, so he was winning most of his games by like 50-ish points on average. He was playing Recon Element, of course. He had a Kading cast or 2 Kading Castlins, 3 Kading Command Squads, Commissar, Gonskos, 2 Ogre Bodyguards, Ursula Creed, 3 units of 20 Cadians, 1 unit of 20 Catachan, 5 units of 10 Death Corps of Krieg, 2 units of 10 Rough Riders, 1 unit of 5 Death Riders, 3 units of 5 Creek Engineers, 1 unit of Ratlings, and a Scout Sentinel. So this is fairly similar to a lot of lists that we've seen him play in the past. One of the big things that he has dropped here, he doesn't have the Scion brick, he doesn't have the 3rd Castellan brick, so it'd be a 4th brick of 20 Cadians. Instead, it's been filled out with a Commissar, 2 Ogre Bodyguards, and the Krieg Engineers as kind of coming in. So it's a little bit more MSU, a little bit more skewed towards just having so many bodies. But it's not going to be doing quite as much damage as some of the other variants that he has, but it does have a little bit more vulnerability or durability. I'm not sure what the Commissar is doing, to be entirely honest, but if you've watched any of the other recon videos, you do know that the basic style of this army does not change with some of these small things that you're doing. You still have the units of Death Riders, or 2 units of 10 Rough Riders that are probably going to be doing some rapid ingressing, or maybe one of them starts on the board, and then you'll just make sure your opponent doesn't charge you at the beginning of the game. You do have to be a little bit wary of Purge the Foe as a mission, which is one reason why you might take some of the like 10-man or the 10-man Scions or the 20-man Cadians in order to alleviate that. I don't know if Purge the Foe was at this event or not, but Wesley St. Hines doing very, very well. He is one of the best specialists. He has been on this list for more than a year at this point, I think. So I'm not super surprised. He's one of the best players in the world. He's on a list that he understands way better than anybody else does. So not super surprising that he's going to be doing well here. From here on out, everyone who is playing guard ended up being either poorly used or liability. And let's go ahead and get into it immediately. For Team France, we have Pierre, I guess, Bessair, going 2 and 3. Got a 4 into CSM, 11s into Votan twice, a 1 into Jukari, and a 0-20 into Custodes. So let's go ahead and talk about the list. It's a Cadian Command Squad, a Commissar with Ad Human Detail, 2 Silent Command Squads, a Rogolthorn Commander, 1 unit of 10 Cadians, 1 unit of 10 Catachan, 2 Chimeras, 1 unit of 5 Rough Riders, 2 units of 6 Bullgryn, 2 units of Kazarkin, 1 unit of 10 Scions, 1 unit of 5 Scions, and a Rogolthorn Battle Tank. So this list looks okay overall. One of the big things that you will be seeing a lot of the time on WTC terrain, Bullgryn are definitely better on WTC because things are closer. However, one of the issues that this list is going to be running into quite a bit is we're spending a lot of points on the Scions and not as many points on the things to stand in front of the Bullgryn. One of the major issues that we do have is thinking that Bullgryn are the first wave. Bullgryn are very rarely the first wave. They're usually going to be the second wave. And not having a lot of little pieces, you basically just have like the Catachan. The Kazarkin and Chimeras can kind of fill this role, but they also kind of like being a second wave unit. So you're really just looking at like 10 Catachan and the 5 Rough Riders and maybe the Chimeras and Kazarkin as your first wave that your Bullgryn can then charge things that charge the Kazarkin or your other first wave of stuff. And not having that unit count with these Bullgryn lists ends up really kind of being an issue because if your Bullgryn are eating the charges, there are things that can kill Bullgryn. If your opponent knows how to deal with Bullgryn and Bullgryn are so omnipresent in the meta, you end up finding yourself in a really odd position. Now, I don't know if Pierre has a history of playing guard. I haven't seen his name pop up before. And a couple other people I know who are more familiar with the European scene have said that they have not seen Pierre play this, and called a lot of the other players at this event guard tourists, right? They're just playing it because the army is good. This list is okay. It would not be my style of doing this. I would definitely recommend having more MSU. I don't think the 10-man Scions makes a ton of sense in this list. I would really like to see that being like another unit of Rough Riders or Death Riders or Catachan or something, or just stand in front. Or you can go the other direction and add even more Chimeras and Kazarkin in order to try and overwhelm things. But this feels like it kind of misses the point of playing a lot of these units. It's a good list, but at the level of playing a Pyra Cup, I don't think it's optimized. Next, we have Pascal Haberstro. There is at least one video of Pascal playing up against John Lennon on Contact Lost. So if you are interested in seeing that, it is worth noting that is the 0-20. So a couple of things here. Let's go ahead and go over the list. It is, of course, Grizzle Company, 1 Cadian Castellan, a Cadian Command Squad, 3 Scion Command Squads, an Ogre Bodyguard, 2 Rogolthorn Commanders, 1 unit of 20 Cadians, 1 unit of 10 Krieg, 2 Chimeras, 1 unit of 5 Rough Riders, 1 unit of Catachan Mortars, 2 Kazarkin, 2 units of 5 Krieg Engineers, and 3 units of 5 Scions. So this is similar in a lot of ways. It bears a lot of similarities to the Doombolt lists that I've been a really big proponent of. However, it's in kind of an odd position because the Catachan Mortars don't contribute to this game plan. They're kind of your way to just like stand something in the rear if you do want to take them. However, they are pulling quite a bit away from your ability to play the mid board. And so this is another one of those where it's like it's really close to like an optimized list, but the 5 Rough Riders and the Catachan Mortars are really kind of asking some questions of this could have been better mid board, right? If we were looking at like a third unit of Kazarkin, to play the midboard as something that we'll see in one of our later lists, um, then we could like have a little bit more pressure there, or even just contributing more to the Krieg engineers and just having a ton of mortal wounds and a ton of 4-up save bodies. I think they both would have made a little bit more sense. Unfortunately, one of the big things that we saw in this is, at least in the game that we watched him play up against John Lennon, is potentially a lack of understanding of when you can attack certain armies. And one of the major issues that we are oftentimes seeing, and this is something that we can play to our favor against a lot of players, is a lot of players know, or a lot of players think that they have to respect Dorn's shooting. You tell them it's like, yeah, I have a 72-inch gun, D6 plus 3 at 12-2-3. And it's a good gun. It is a good gun. However, that's basically the only thing we can shoot across the entire table. And if you find yourself in situations where you're getting into long range shootouts, you're going to slowly lose shootouts against most of the other tanks in the game. The Dorn is not primarily an anti tank tank. It is going to absolutely obliterate most shooting matchups at the 18 to 24 inches, where you can get the multi meltas in range. It is going to win almost every duel at that range. But if you are more than 30 inches away and you are not getting your meltas in, you are going to lose the shootout to a ton of things. It's going to be like you're going to lose to repulsors, you're going to lose to hammerheads, you're going to lose to riptides a lot of the time. Um, you're going to lose to land forts if they have like the double, what do you call it? The railgun there, right? You're going to lose to vanquishers. You're going to lose a ton of shootouts with your Dorn if you're going to be shooting it across the court. And because he was playing into Ultramarines where it's -1 to wound and toughness 12 on the repulsors, suddenly your main gun, the only gun you're shooting down range, your opponent can make it wound on 5s. The Dorn does not win any of these like long range shootouts at all. It's not what it does. Um, and John Lennon absolutely tore Pascal apart using the fact that he had the repulsors, he was going to win these long range shootouts, and the Ultramarines were able to just control it that way. Um, I don't know how the rest of the games went, but you're kind of seeing a lot of people don't realize how aggressive you really need to be with guard tanks. You really need to be playing them in a way that they are going to be getting into that 18 to 24 inch range relatively early on. And I think that we kind of see a little bit of that issue showing up here in this list. So anyway, Draw into Drukhari, 0-20 into Ultramarines. Again, you can watch that on Contact Lost. 13-7 into Thousand Suns, 1-19 into Black Templars, and an 8-12 into Necrons. So overall, this is another list where it's almost there. However, there are a couple things here that I think are really detracting from it, being the 5 Rough Riders don't make a lot of sense to me, and the Catachan Mortars really don't make any sense to me at all. Next, we have Philipp Koenig playing for Team Austria. Now, I know Philip said that he felt he was used incorrectly in the last couple of rounds. I can't say more than like, well, I don't know exactly like how he feels, but I also know that Philip went into this event without a ton of reps on this specific list. This is something that Gustavo de Sousa has been pushing quite a bit with the Silent Command Squad, but let's go ahead and talk about it now. We got the Cadian Castellan, a Cadian Command Squad with a Quill and Eye, another Cadian Command Squad, 3 Silent Command Squads, 2 Ogryn Bodyguards, a Rogaldorn Commander, 1 of 20 Cadians, 1 of 10 Krieg, 2 units of Chimeras, 1 Taurox, 3 Khazarkin, 1 of 10 Krieg Engineers, 2 units of 5 Krieg Engineers, and then 3 units of 5 Scions. So this is like, it's very much a Doombolt list, and one of the big things that you'll notice about this is it only has 1 Rogaldorn. So you're missing out on some of that like long range shooting. Just as I was saying before, that if you, like good players know that they can disrespect Dorns outside of about 30 inches, because you need to get like that 13 plus 18 for the multi-miltas to get in range. And if you don't have that, Dorns will not be winning shootouts against a lot of tanks. Having only 1 Rogaldorn means that a lot of the time you can kind of disrespect the Rogaldorn at long range in ways that you can't disrespect 2, because 2 Rogaldorns can oftentimes kill your Predators, your Hammerheads, your Riptides, whatever at long range, but you're usually not going to do it with just 1. So you do have to be very careful with that. The other big thing about this list is oftentimes you have the Cadian Command Squad or you have one of the Cadian command squads that's going to be playing with the Ogre Bodyguard, but the other Ogre Bodyguard is just going to be running around with a single Cadian command squad. And you don't have the way to order it because you don't have the Commissar with Add Human Detail, so it's like, it's okay. But overall, this is closer to what I would say like an optimized list in terms of like optimizing for the Doombolt style. I'm not a big fan of the Aquilon Eye. I don't think it's a particularly strong enhancement in general because it's 20 points, and two, you can throw it on like Kazurkin if you want, but it costs you a CP. The only way that I've really found Aquilon Eye to be super useful is if you put it on a Scion command squad, and then it drops down, it orders itself and another Scion unit plus 1 AP, so you end up having 2 units of Scions dropping down with first ring fire, second ring fire, and target weak spot, I think it's called, whatever the plus 1 AP order is. And that does a little bit more damage into most targets than take aim, but it's also fairly close. Um, but anyway, this ended up being a rough one. I know Ostrid was not bringing the strongest roster they could have, but they ended up getting a 12 into Demons, a draw into Admech, and then they lost pretty bad into Drukhari, Custodes, and Necrons with a 2, 1, and a 0 all at the same time. Philip is one of the few players that went to this event that was not a guard tourist, someone who's been playing guard for a little while, but playing a list without a ton of reps on it at this level of competition, and apparently not being used the way that the captain or that Philip wanted to be used, ends up leaving it in kind of a bad spot. Okay, the last list I will start off with. If my captain made me play Necrons 3 times in a row with this list, I would think my captain didn't like me. This list really is not it. It's a Cadian command squad, Commissar with Add Human Detail, a Scion command squad with Laud Hailer, so it's just filling 10 points, a second Scion command squad, an Ogre Bodyguard, 2 Rogel Dorn commanders, 1 unit of 10 Cadians, 2 units of 5 Rough Riders, 2 units of 6 Bullgryn, 2 units of 5 Scions, a Luminous Exterminator, and a Luminous Vanquisher. So this list is just all over the place. It's basically like you take all of you basically take like one of every good unit. But the biggest problem here is it doesn't feel very cohesive. So just like we were saying before with the Bullgryn list that I think it was Pascal, no, Pierre was playing. Um, you don't have a first wave, and that's a massive problem in this list. Your first wave is 2 units of 5 Rough Riders, maybe the Vanquisher, but this is a list that is absolutely using the Bullgryn as a first wave, and yes, the Bullgryn take a lot to kill, but they don't kill anything. The biggest thing is that they are never going to be making charges that we want to. They're never going to be hitting targets that we want the Bullgryn to get into because they're slow. They move 6 and charge 12. Meaning that realistically they move maybe like 13 inches on average. Whereas every combat army, everything that we really want Bullgryn to be like running into, move way faster than that. You're not going to be catching Blood Angels. You're not going to be catching World Eaters. You're not really going to be catching Orcs. And if you are, then like you're kind of like in a really weird spot where it's not the most efficient thing anyway. So there's no way for this army to really start fights on its own terms. And the other big thing is like if you take the grizzled like Rogel Dorns and you pop lethals on one Rogel Dorn commander and you get the second Rogel Dorn commander shoot at the same Catan, you can kill it. It's like on average you will kill a Catan for ACP and 2 Rogel Dorns. But the really big problem that you're also going to be having is, can you kill the rest of them? Because you don't have the ability to force the Catan to come out in ways that you really want to. If there's a Silent King, they're going to be indirecting Rough Riders. They're going to be able to take angles in ways that the Rogel Dorns are not going to be able to get to. So this really misses out on the how do we start fights. It doesn't understand that we are going to be making trades, that we're trying to trade our opponent down and beat them with our better unit count. So I'm not going to lie, I don't understand this list, and the fact that it went 0 wins, 3 losses, and 2 draws is, I think, at the level of event that Pyra Cup is, about as good as it could have hoped for. This is the kind of thing where I would only really ever want to play this into, like, Blood Angels or some other kind of Marines, where they also have really little unit counts, and we can kind of play, like, our Exterminator and our Vanquisher a lot farther forward in ways that we can't do against a lot of the other armies. Okay, Next, let's go ahead and start talking about singles. From here on out, I believe the entire thing is singles just in general. We only have one list of Doombolt Guard. This is what I believe is probably the strongest singles archetype that you can play if you're just trying to play up against anything. And the big reason that I believe that is it has one of the better matchups that we can have into Necrons, and it has one of the better matchups that we can bring into Marines because it does a lot of things. One, it does a lot of mortal wounds. It's got a lot of bodies, so we can kind of dance around Catan in a lot of ways. And then it has all the mortal wounds that you're going to be doing in weird sequences to Marines, where they won't be able to reactive move necessarily. They won't necessarily be able to what do you call it? They won't be able to do their surge moves until we've already done a bunch of mortal wounds, so we can pick up a couple Victrix that way before we even have to fire a shot. And so it ends up having some really good tools into a lot of the other armies that are good in ways that I don't think Bullgryn generally do, because Bullgryn, they're good, they're just slow, and a lot of the other armies do have ways to kind of rip them apart or kind of ignore them because they're slow. So the only one that we have today is David Purcell at Cherokee Open. There is a game that you can watch from David Purcell on Wargames Live. It was round 5 or 6. I think it was round 6 that he was playing up against Chaos Knights. But David was playing Caden Castellan at Caden Command Squad, 3 Silent Command Squads, Nork Deadog, 2 Rogaldorn Commanders, 1 unit of 20 Cadians, 2 Chimeras, 3 units of Kazarkin, 3 units of 5 Krieg Engineers, and 3 units of 5 Scions. This is very similar to the list that I took to West Coast Warbands about 2-3 weeks ago at this point. The biggest difference here is the third Chimera and 10 men of Cadians that I was playing has been substituted out for a Scion Command Squad and 5 more Scions. Then there's 10 more points that I had on Laud Hailer just to fill things in. This list clearly did pretty well. Ended up going 6-1, getting I think 10th overall out of like 400 people. The big risk here, of course, is one, you are oftentimes going to be forced to start 1 unit of Scions on the board in order to make sure that you don't get rushed down by a lot of different armies. And then you are a little bit more susceptible to getting like indirected, and you're a little bit slower with the Kazarkin. But it's kind of made up for with the unit of 5, or the extra unit of 10 Scions. So you do have to, you're making some trades back and forth, but it's not quite as like in your face as the third Chimera version of the list is. Overall, he ended up getting a bunch of good wins into Death Guard, Demons, Tau, Dark Angels, Ultramarines, Chaos Knights before losing to I don't remember who his last opponent was, but he ended up losing to Ultramarines in round 7. If you're looking at this on Best Coast pairings, of course, David Purcell doesn't believe in Elo, so his Elo is kind of fake at this point because he plays under a different name at every GT. If you're for this one, you're looking for David Purell, the heir to the Purell fortune. All right. Next, let's go ahead and get into some more common archetypes that we have been seeing. The first one is 2 Dorns and at least 2 Vanquishers coming out. So this is, as we've always said, this is a list that tends to win a lot of its games off of just raw violence in the shooting phase, because you have the 2 Royal Dorn Commanders and the 3 Luminous Vanquishers, and the Vanquishers do a couple of things. One, into armies that we aren't as worried about getting outshot, so into like World Eaters or Orcs or something. You can put the Vanquishers up forward where they're just going to be their roadblock. They kind of take the place of the Bullgryn, and you have 3 units of Vanquishers, or 2 or 3 units of Vanquishers that kind of take that spot where they're just really durable T11 2+ holes that you can move into the midboard. Against armies that we are more worried about shooting, like Tau, that might be it, Tau and like Ultramarines, the Vanquishers actually do force your opponent to be careful, because a Vanquisher can just one-shot a Vindicator, right? And it's going to be doing it at a range that the Vindicator cannot interact with, because it's going to be doing, it can do it from across the entire board. So it does give you a couple of tools. You do have to remember that the Vanquisher, we always kind of have to play that it's going to miss, and our opponent needs to always play as though it's going to hit. It is just an incredibly swingy and incredibly binary situation with the main gun. So the first thing, we have Chris Daly, another member of the Atlanta community, going to Cherokee Open, going 6-1. He had a Cadian Command Squad, 1 Sun Command Squad, 2 Royal Dorn Commanders, Ursa Creed, 20 Cadians, 1 unit of 10 Catachan, 2 Chimeras, 3 units of 5 Rough Riders, a unit of Death Riders, 1 unit of Kazarkin, 1 unit of 5 Scions, and then 3 Lemur's Vanquishers. So this list is a little bit odd to me, because it does have I mean, it understands really well that here's the first wave. Your first wave is going to be some Rough Riders and Death Riders just going out and getting in your opponent's face. The second wave is a little bit odd. The Catachan in the Chimera is almost definitely just there to go OC dump on your opponent's natural one time. But one of the things that this list really relies upon is intelligent positioning of the Ursula Creed and the Keating Command Squad, where Chris is actually the person who like showed me this the first time, where you can kind of string out the entire Kading brick from your home objective to the natural, and you just kind of go put a tendril out over there as your way to try and hold natural relatively early in the game. And then after that, you can start doing it with Lemur's Vanquishers, you can do it with your Chimera, you can do it with Kazarkin, you can do it with all kinds of things. But it's one of the ways that you can get an advantage against a lot of opponents early on by trying to steal some extra primary. Overall, though, pretty normal Dorns and Vanquishers list, getting wins into World Leaders, Demons, Admech, Custodies, Necrons, Votan, and losing to Sisters. Okay, next we have the Milwaukee GT by Tyler White, a player who I have not seen before, so welcome to the videos for the first time. Tyler is playing a Kading Castellan with Spec Ops Veteran, a Kading Command Squad, an Ogren Bodyguard, 3 Rogaldorn Commanders, one of which had Aquilin Eye, 1 unit of 20 Cadens, 3 units of 10 Cadens, 2 Toraxes, 2 Kazarkin, and 2 Vanquishers. I think this list has a couple of places where it could very easily be upgraded. The first one is I don't value Spec Ops Veteran very highly at all. There's like 1 or 2 matchups where you kind of want it, but they're all like, if it's like a Ballistic Skill 4 army that doesn't have ways to help that out, like, I don't know, Votan in a couple of weird situations, the Spec Ops Veteran, whatever the stealth order is called, will get you a couple of extra bodies, but into almost everything else, take cover is going to be better math for you, just because you're trying to get yourself to be saving on those 4s or 3s, even depending on how much AP they're shooting at you with. The Aquilin Eye is another 20 points that I don't think you're ever really going to be doing this. It is the band of things where you're going to be getting that extra damage with Aquilin Eye as opposed to just take aim is very, very small. They don't come up all that often. So you generally are going to be wanting to stick to just take aim. So that's like 30, 40 points that we can immediately look to reinvest. And then the 20 Cadians with the Kading Command Squad, Castellan, and the Ogren Bodyguard is definitely a strong unit to play. But the next 3 units of 10 Cadians, this army is a little bit slow in the fact that it only really has the 2 Toraxes with Scout. I would really like to see at least one of these become a unit of Catachan, and then the other 2 maybe Death Core of Krieg in order to have a little bit better staying power on the board. Otherwise, it's just trying to go punch people in the mouth pretty hard with the Kazarkin, draw them out that way, and then you can use your Vanquishers. But it kind of is a little bit slow on the getting that first trade going, because the Cadians are a bit slower than you could do with something like Catachan. Anyway, wins into Custodies, Dark Angels, Orcs, losing to Thousand Suns before beating Eldari in the 5th round. So welcome to the video, Tyler, and hope to see you again soon. Okay, next we have the 2 Dorns and 12 Bullgryn. Again, one of the big things that you're going to be looking at this style of list. You have 2 Dorns and at least 12 Bullgryn, and then you surround it with one of 2 things. It's either a bunch of horses, maybe some Krieg Engineers, but it's going to be a bunch of cheap 60-point units that you can throw out as your first wave. The other thing that you can do with this style of list is you can diversify it and go lots of, particularly Kazarkin in transports. That are going to go, they're going to really skirmish, and this is a version that is going to be doing more with your midboard push with your Chimeras and the Kazarkin, and a little bit less just like OC dumping. It's going to be doing a little bit more damage that way, but you're not necessarily going to have the same kind of just stand dudes in places the horse variants are going to be. The first one that we have is Juha. I think it's going to be Juha Ottolen at Talvisota. So impressive from this one. Juha actually beat Eero Sakonen, who is, as far as I'm aware, the best Finnish guard player, who basically every time I see an event in Finland that a guard player shows up at, it's usually going to be Eero. And Juha beat them in round 5 this event. So really good win there from Juha this time. The list was a Kading Command Squad, Commissar with IP Detail, 2 Silent Command Squads, 2 Rogaldorn Commanders, 1 unit of 10 Cadians, a Chimera, 1 Torox, 2 units of 5 Rough Riders, 2 units of 6 Bullgryn, 2 units of Kazarkin, 5 Krieg Engineers, and 2 units of 5 Scions. So this is like kind of in between, right? On the far end of the spectrum, we have a ton of horses, and on the other end of the spectrum, we have all Kazarkin in transports. This is like somewhere in between. It pulls a couple of things from Doombolt Guard, and I feel like because of that, it ends up finding itself in a bit of a weird middle ground where it doesn't do any of the things quite as well as it potentially could have. But it's still going to be doing all the regular things you want. You still have plenty of cheap things to just go throw out into the middle of the board, and then you're going to be charging them with Bullgryn and shooting them with Dorn commanders. He ends up getting a win into Death Guard, Eldar, losing into Necrons before beating Chaos Knights and Eros Hakonen's Guard in the 5th round. So congratulations to Yuha. Hopefully I'm pronouncing your name correctly, and hopefully I'll see you again soon. Okay, next at the Oxford Onslaught, moving over to, I'm assuming this is the UK because it's in Oxford. Pierre Alexandre Hughes Daly, a player that I have seen a couple of times pop up, but I believe this is the first time they've made it into one of the videos. So, hello, Pierre, and welcome to the videos. He was running a Cadian Command Squad, Commissar with Ad Human Detail, Gaunt's Ghost, a Silent Command Squad, 2 Rogue Dorn Commanders, an Engine Seer, 1 unit of 10 Cadians, 2 units of 10 Catachan, 2 Toroxes, 2 units of 6 Bullgryn, 2 units of Khazarkan, and 10 Scions. So a couple of things here. Again, does a lot, leans a little bit more towards like the cheap stuff that you throw at people instead of having the horses. You have the Catachan here. I'm not really a fan of the Engine Seer. I think in general there are very few matchups where I prefer the Engine Seer to just more points of stuff. It's like Stormfire Vindicators. That's about it, really. For things that I really want the Engine Seer. Oh, I guess like Tau. Like if you're expecting a lot of like Tau railguns in your army or in your local meta, you can consider the Engine Seer as well. But in general, this is usually better spent on other matchups. And the other big thing here is I think those points could be spent a little bit better on like upgrading the Toroxes to Chimeras. And then you also have some points with the 15-man Scions. I think 15-man Scions, every time I've played them and every time I talk to other players about them, 15-man Scions, they do just kill whatever they're looking at. But they still kind of struggle to punch up into toughness 10 or higher vehicles. They still kind of struggle to punch up into things that have invulns. Just because it's a lot of volume, but it's a lot of stuff that's going to be winning on 5s and 6s. So, in general, I really like the Scion Command Squad plus 5 Scions because especially if you pop ignores cover on that unit, you're very consistently going to be killing 10 Marines without an invul already. And then the 10 Scions with the command squad, sure, you're going to be killing like 15 Marines, but there's not a lot of units of 15 Marines out there that we really need to deal with. Anyway, Pierre got a win into Tau, Space Wolves, Orcs, and Drukhari, and lost to Blood Angels in the 3rd round. Next, we're going to be going over to a player, one of 2 guard players that has beat me in the guard mirror this edition. It is Scott Cairns, winning Mad Alpaca in the Greater Bay Area. He had a Cadian Castellan, 2 Cadian Command Squads, a Commissar with Ad Human Detail, Gaunt's Ghost, a Silent Command Squad, Nork Deadog, 2 Rogal Dorn Commanders, 1 unit of 20 Cadians, 1 unit of 10, 2 units of 5 Rough Riders, 2 units of 6 Bullgryn, a unit of 10 Scions, and a Hellhound. He won every single one of his games into Dark Angels, Tau, Necrons, Tau, and Sisters. And this is the kind of army that just kind of goes forward. One of the big things here is you do have like 4 major damage dealing pieces between the 2 Rogal Dorn Commanders, the 15-man Scions, and the Cadian Castellan Brick with Nork Deadog. So you do have just 4 hammers, and the big thing here that you're going to want to be doing is you have those 2 units of 5 Rough Riders, you have the Hellhound, which is a first wave unit in most matchups. You just send it out, ask your opponent, can you kill this toughness 10 2-up save vehicle? A lot of armies are going to have to commit something relatively real, and then you have your units of Rough Riders and your units of Bullgryn that are going to be following that up, and then whatever your opponent brings out to kill the Bullgryn, you will just be absolutely destroying them with the 4 hammers that you're bringing in the rest of the list. So overall, I think there's, again, maybe some room to move one of these Scion units around, maybe have like that extra unit, but I do know the last round of this event was Purge the Foe. So overall, good stuff. Good to see you once again, Scott, coming a bit more active yet again. All right, next, another player that we have seen pop up from time to time. We have Andre Gorin, who was here last week, 2 weeks ago. I think it was Valentine's weekend, so it would have been last week at Springs Thundercluckers, playing another variant of the 12 Bullgryn. 2 Cadian Command Squads, 1 Commissar with Ad Human Detail, 3 Scion Command Squads, Nork Deadog, 1 Rogal Dorn Commander, 1 unit of 10 Cadians, 1 unit of 10 Catachan, 1 unit of 10 Rough Riders, 1 unit of 5 Rough Riders, 2 units of 6 Bullgryn, 5 Rattlings, 3 units of 5 Scions, and the Dorn Battle Tank. So my big thoughts about this, again, it's kind of low on that first wave of stuff in order to create a lot of space for the rest of your army. Instead, it has a ton of potentially rapid ingress threats between the 3 Scion units and the 10 Rough Riders. You are a little bit more durable up against like those Ultramarine or Tau matchups where you do have the Dorn Battle Tank instead of a Commander. But it does come at the fact that you are a little bit less controlling of the early board space. The 5 Rattlings will help into some matchups, and they will just win some other games like on the spot if you go first, you infiltrate, move, shoot, move, and control the board that way. But it is a little bit less well-rounded than some other guard lists that I have seen. Getting here a win, Andre got Eldar, Orcs, Deathwatch, Guard, and then lost in the last round to Ultramarines, and I believe, unfortunately, losing out on an opportunity for a golden ticket there. So well done to Andre. I think this is maybe 2 weeks in a row, or maybe you were there 2 weeks ago, whatever it was. Good to see you yet again. Okay, the next section is the Dorns, Bullgryns, and Vanquishers. You tend to see a little bit of this. It's kind of a toughness skew. It really is just a toughness skew. It's generally going to be 2 Rogal Dorns, 12 Bullgryn, and 1 or 2 Vanquishers. And the Vanquisher kind of serves as that third Bullgryn thing that can kind of move out into the board relatively early on. Overall, like this kind of list feels very much like a very consistent 4-1 kind of list, but not necessarily going to be playing the game, or like it plays the I'm going to trade pieces over and over game extraordinarily well. The problem is it doesn't necessarily play primary quite as effectively because you're oftentimes going to be having like 1 unit of Bullgryn kind of sit on objective, and then it's 200 points that are just standing on primary, which is not the most exciting thing in the world. And you're also low on other pieces to just go stand in places. You really just have to brawl it out with these kind of lists. However, we do have a lot of people who are on this list. First one that we have is Luke Parumon down in New Zealand at the next Chile event, going 4-1 with a Cadian Command Squad, Commissar, Gonskos, 2 Rogal Dorn Commanders, 10 Cadians, 2 units of 5 Rough Riders, 6 Bullgryn, 1 unit of 5 Death Riders, Aquilons, and 2 Luminar's Vanquishers. So, big thing here, you do have the 3 units of Rough Riders or 3 units of horses that I feel is kind of like the minimum investment in order to play this kind of list outside of like all of your hammer pieces. But I'm not really sure what the Aquilons are doing in this list. They're not really supported by Grizzled Company very well, unless you're dropping Gaunt's Ghost with them. They generally drop in a spot that is too far away for the Cadian Command Squad to like throw out an order to them. With like snap to it. So it's kind of an odd piece here. It's probably not what I would have spent 100 points on, but still ends up getting the job done. Wins here into Tyranids, Thousand Sons, Death Guard, loss into Necrons, and a win into Demons. So it's good to see you again, Luke, and hopefully we'll see you soon. Moving over to France at Octoputre. I'm sure I'm saying that wrong. Octoputre Solo, second place by Morgan de Connor. A player, so you do have to remember here over in France, they don't play nearly as much singles as a lot of the rest of the world. France and Spain in particular are very, very teams dominated, and they also don't really play on Best Coast pairings very often. Most of the time they've been on mini headquarters, so a lot of their events where they do not use their real names. They're oftentimes using gamer names or gamer tags. So a lot of them are really, really underranked, and Morgan de Connor is probably one of those, because Morgan ends up going 5-0. Cadian Command Squad, Commissar, Gonsko, Scion Command Squad, 2 Rogal Dorn Commanders, 1 unit of 10 Cadians, 1 unit of 10 Catachan, 2 units of 6 Bullgryn, 1 unit of 3 Bullgryn, a unit of 5 Death Riders, 1 unit of 5 Scions, 2 Luminous Vanquishers, and a Calidus Assassin. Now, this list is really interesting to me for a couple of reasons. 3 Bullgryn is not a piece that I see very often. The only other player that I really see take 3 Bullgryn basically ever is David Gross, who lives in New England. And then you're really just short on stuff that is going to be like going to have the speed to like run up the board quickly. I imagine this was played on either WTC terrain or the French like WTC Games Workshop hybrid, where the Vanquishers can kind of do that job as well. but it does mean that you do have to play your Vanquishers more aggressively than you would in some other matchups because they are one of the few units that has the speed to get out into the midboard relatively quickly. The Calidus is also an interesting one. You don't see a Calidus pop up in Guardless very often, but when you have Gunskos and the Calidus Assassin, it is a ton of free screening, and the Vect Aura can be really nice. I don't know why it was specifically in this list, but I have to imagine that Morgan was taking it for a specific meta read on things that they're trying to shut down. Morgan ends up beating EC, Raven Guard Sisters, Necrons, and Sisters again in the last round. So well done there. A 5-0 second place, losing out on tiebreakers. From the same event, we have Michael Giraud going 4 wins, no losses, and 1 draw. Another player who doesn't have an ELO. Cadian Command Squad, Commissar, Gonskos, 2 Rogaldorn Commanders, 1 unit 10 Cadians, 1 unit 10 Catachan, 1 Chimera, 1 Taurox, 10 Rough Riders, 2 units of 6 Bullgryn, 2 Khazarkin, 1 unit of 5 Krieg Engineers, and 1 Vanquisher. So this is, again, kind of pulling a little bit on like those Doombolt strings to get a little bit more of that brawling power, but another army that is going to be relying on playing like just the Catachan and the Krieg Engineers and maybe the Lemur's Vanquisher relatively far forward, which can kind of put you in a bit of an awkward position overall. And you really have to understand how to play the Vanquisher relatively aggressive in this kind of list. Michael ended up beating CSM, Demons, Blood Angels, Ultramarines before getting a draw up against Ultramarines in the 5th round, unfortunately preventing them from winning the event. Next, we have Cajolean wife over in Spain at the second Califato Wars. Interesting thing, Spain has a really interesting singles meta. A lot of their guard players at this event took basically exactly the same list. I think all 3 had this list plus or minus 100 points of stuff. It was a Cadian Command Squad, a Commissar, Gonskos, Lord Solar, 10 Cadians, a Taurox, an artillery team with a heavy mortar, 1 unit of 5 Rough Riders, 1 unit of 10 Rough Riders, 1 unit of 6 Bullgryn, Khazarkin, a Basilisk, 2 Lemur's Vanquishers, and 2 Rogaldorn Battle Tanks. So the big thing about this that is interesting, 1, the Commissar running around with only 6 Bullgryn in this list means that you don't need to attach it to the Cadian Command Squad like you would like you tend to see with 2 units of 6 Bullgryn. It's going to be Lord Solar attached generally in this spot. But you also have like 5 vehicles that want the order between the Vanquishers, the Rogaldorn Battle Tanks, and the Basilisk. And then you also have this artillery team. So you are going to be like attritioning some armies that way. However, one of the major problems that you do have with this style of list is you can get rushed down pretty hard, especially if you are on search and destroy, where you're just going to be in your DZ immediately against a lot of melee pressure armies, or at least short range pressure armies. So overall, really interesting. Losing round 1 to Emperor's Children before having a bit of a submarine, beating Necrons, Blood Angels, Drukhari, and Blood Angels again. We've seen Cajolean several times at this point showing up, so congratulations on another successful event, and we'll hope to see you soon. Moving over to Manchester, over in the UK, we have Mark Kadri, a player who I have not seen before, so welcome to the video. We have a Cadian Command Squad, a Commissar, 2 Rogaldorn Commanders, 10 Cadians, 10 Catachan again, 2 Tauroxes, 2 units of 6 Bullgryn, unit of Khazarkin, 3 units of Krieg Engineers, and then 2 Lemur's Vanquishers. This is, again, somewhere in between like the Doombolt, or it's like pulling on those Doombolt strings. You do have a lot of units to go stand out in the open. I like this list a lot in general. I think the 2 Tauroxes, there's probably a way to make these a little bit more, or a little bit more of a brawl. As it is, they're mostly just going to be OC dumps. One of them probably has Khazarkin. One of them either has 10 Catachan or 2 units of 5 Krieg Engineers running around. And to be knowing that way and kind of drip feed pieces to your opponent. But overall, makes sense to me. Getting a narrow win into GSC before beating Custodes, Tyranids, Drukhari, and losing to Ultramarines in the last round. Okay, over at the Big Beef Beatdown, we have Dan Salmons, who I believe was the first guy to win a GT with the Grizzled Company, making a repeat appearance, getting a 5-1. A Cadian Command Squad, 1 Commissar, Gonskos, 2 Rogaldorn Commanders, 1 unit of 10 Cadians, 1 unit of 10 Catachan, 1 unit of 10 Krieg, getting every single animal. Oh, excuse me. 1 unit of 10 Rough Riders, 2 units of 6 Bullgryn, 2 units of 5 Death Riders, 2 Lemur's Vanquishers, and 2 Scout Sentinels. I like this list quite a bit. You have all of the pieces that you're generally going to be looking for. You have the cheap things to throw out relatively early. You have the Vanquishers that can play relatively aggressively or also play that long range shooting duel. You have the Scout Sentinels, which are oftentimes going to be like your first wave. They still scout 9, they still move 10. They're still 55 points. So this is oftentimes the way that you're going to be forcing your opponent to play the game up against your Bullgryn, up against your Vanquishers, up against your Rogel Dorns. Seems really, honestly, if you're looking for a list that you're trying to use, I would recommend people give this one a look. It is using the 10 Rough Riders probably as your Rapid Ingress threat, but you could also do it if you wanted to mess around and find some room for some Scions. I think this is a good place to start. All right, next, we're actually going back to an archetype that was way more common before we had Grizzled Company released to us, and that is just tanks and midboard. A very standard kind of combined list. You have some tanks, you have stuff that stands in the midboard. You're trying to make your opponent come out and then kill them with your tanks. Very similar conceptually to a lot of the Dorns and Vanquishers lists. But in general, these don't have any of those other pieces. They generally just have a lot of firepower and then some ability or some tools to brawl in the midboard. This one was Ryan Reese over at Oxford Onslaught, getting 3rd place overall. Cadian Command Squad, Gaunt's Ghost, Lord Solar, Nork Deadog, Rogel Dorn Commander, 10 Cadians, 10 Catachan, 10 Krieg, 2 Torxes, 1 unit of 10 Rough Riders, 2 units of Kazarkin, 5 Ratlings, a Hellhound, and 2 Rogel Dorn Battle Tanks. So, interesting thing about this one, I feel like Nork Deadog is kind of an odd piece in this list. It is definitely a later game brawling piece because it's going to be attached to 10 Cadians and Lord Solar and the Cadian Command Squad, so it won't come out for a while. Which always, whenever I see like an Ogryn Bodyguard that is, or a Nork Deadog that is attached to something that is not either just a Cadian Command Squad, or sometimes a Catachan Command Squad, or something with a Castellan, I always get a little bit worried that it's not going to be getting the value that I oftentimes would want it to. It definitely feels like this could have been something like 5 more Ratlings, or 5 Rough Riders, or 5 Engineers that could play the game earlier, where you aren't spending 60 points that are just kind of sitting there in the back. Anyway, Ryan loses to Sisters before beating Emperor's Children, Death Guard, Necrons, and Tyranids. Ryan, I believe I've seen the name pop up once or twice before, but welcome to the videos if I have not covered you in the past. Next, we have a player that we haven't seen in a little while, Neil Burns Morales, getting 2nd place overall with a 5-0 at Du Bois Golden Sprue. Going back to Combined Arms, we're going to see a couple more Combined Arms detachment lists this weekend, because as the Grizzled nerf comes through, you are seeing a couple people starting to value the lethal hits a little bit more, especially into the Catan meta. But it is going to be a Cadian Command Squad, 2 Rogel Dorn Commanders, one of which has Grand Strategist, 1 unit of 20 Cadians, 1 unit of 10 Krieg, a Taurox, 2 units of 5 Rough Riders, 1 unit of 6 Bullgryn, still being played a little bit in Combined. Some people were just playing it in Combined beforehand anyway, so not super surprised to see it pop up. 1 unit of Kazarkin, 5 Ratlings, 2 Luminous Battle Tanks, and a Rogel Dorn Battle Tank. So this is, again, a very violent list. You're kind of a little bit light on the things that are going to be that first wave. However, especially if you're playing into, like, Necrons, the Luminous Battle Tank with lethal hits is one of the most efficient things that we have in order to do damage to the Catan. The AP1 doesn't really matter. Those full hit rerolls with lethal hits and just volume of attacks, those multi-meltas with rerolling lethal hits, suddenly becomes very, very valuable in those matchups in particular. You do have to be a little bit careful that you can like screen out enough, because there's not that many units that are going to be doing it for you. But if you can navigate those, this can be very successful, particularly on more open layouts like Games Workshop. Neil ends up beating Necrons twice before beating Blood Angels, Demons, and Death Guard for an overall 5-0 2nd place. So well done to Neil. Good to see you again. Next, we have Patrick Bylargen, also at Du Bois Golden Sprue. Patrick is a player that I've seen pop up fairly often, but I believe this is the first time I've covered them in one of the videos. It is a Grizzled list with Cadian Castellan, 2 Cadian Command Squads, Lord Solar, a Scion Command Squad, Nork Deadog, and Ogryn Bodyguard, 2 Rogel Dorn Commanders, 2 units of 20 Cadians, 2 units of 5 Rough Riders, a unit of Death Riders, 5 Rattlings, 5 Scions, a Cyclops, a Hellhound, and a Rogaldorn battle tank. So it is, you just have like a lot of stuff that can go run out into the middle of the board, and this one has kind of like those 5 hammers, but realistically kind of 4. The Cadian Castellan with the Cadians and probably Nork Deadog. Does quite a bit of damage. Then you have the 3 Rogaldorns of various types, and then the Ogre Bodyguard, Lord Solar unit can be kind of that late game hammer. So you are very focused on using your Rough Riders and your Rattlings to run around and create some screens early on, force your opponent to come play with all the damage that you're bringing, and then you can beat them that way. Patrick lost his sisters before beating Empress Children, Death Guard, Necrons, and Tyranids for a 4-1. So congrats to Patrick on, I believe, the first time I've had you show up in one of these videos. Next, we have Brent Gibson over at Winter Maelstrom going 4-1 with another combined arms list. And this is another one that is kind of similar to a lot of things we've seen in the past. Cadian Castellan, Cadian Command Squad, 2 Rogaldorns, one of which has Grand Strategist and a unit of 20 Cadians. This is something that I've played a couple of times in GTs as well. 1 Chimera, 2 units of 5 Death Riders, 1 Fueled Ordnance Battery, a unit of Khazarkin, 1 Luminous Battle Tank, an Exterminator, a Vanquisher, and 2 Scout Sentinels. I'm never a fan of Indirect. I'm especially not a fan of Indirect in combined arms. I think that could have been a unit of Khazarkin very easily. But otherwise, this list makes decent sense overall. You have enough units to go stand out in front relatively early on. You have a unit of 20 Creed to go stand out in your natural. It is still a very good tool to have in your arsenal to know how to play that one. And you have plenty of damage to follow it up. It's just a little bit low on that first wave, and then the second wave, you have to start playing the game for real with your tanks relatively quickly because you do not have that super strong first or second wave. But it is such a strong third wave that sometimes it does not matter. Brent got a win into World Leaders Salamanders CSM, losing to Sisters before beating Necrons in the 5th round. So welcome back to the video, Brent, and hope to see you again soon. All right, next at Springs Thundercluckers, we have Lane Nussbaum also playing combined arms, going 4-1, getting a. This is something that I've seen Lane play many a time. Smaller variations of this. I believe this is almost identical to the list he took to the West Coast Warbands, but he changed the detachment from Grizzled Company to combined arms. It's a Cadian Command Squad with Grand Strategist, 2 Rogaldorn Commanders, Sly Marbo, 2 units of 10 Cadians, 2 units of 10 Catachan, 2 units of 6 Bullgryn, 5 Rattlings, a Luminous Exterminator, a Rogaldorn Battle Tank, and 3 Scout Sentinels. So you do have a lot of tools here, right? You have the 3 Scout Sentinels, you have the Rattlings, and the 2 units of Catachan, who are kind of that first wave, sometimes part of that second wave. And then one of the things that we have been seeing a little bit more is once you have like those 3 or more like scouting things that are just going to go out into the middle of the board relatively early on, you can start changing away from Catachan to things like Cadians or the Krieg. This one opting for the Cadians, but overall you still have a lot of the tools that we talked about before in order to be very successful. This one probably could have gone in the 2 Dorns and 12 Bullgryn because it was combined arms. I decided to put it somewhere else. Anyway, Lane ends up beating Custodes, Salamanders, Demons, losing to Andre Gorn in the 4th round, who we did show up earlier, and beating Dark Angels in the last one. All right, we have a couple of very entertaining events and a very, very funny list here in just a moment. Tank piles. You got to know how to play the midboard with your tanks. If you can do that, then these lists can be pretty strong. First one, we have Hayden Hodge going 5-1, getting 2nd place at Return of Necrosaur down in Tucson, Arizona. Let's get into it, and I'll talk about it in a moment. It is a Cadian Command Squad with Spec Ops Veteran, Lord Solar, Slime Marbo, 3 Engine Seers, 1 unit of 10 Cadians, 1 Chimera, 1 unit of Khazarkin, 5 Rattlings, and then a Baneblade, a Hellhammer, and a Shadow Sword. I'm going to let that sink in. A Baneblade, a Hellhammer, and a Shadow Sword. So, I'm going to start off with why I'm not super sold on this list in general. Firstly, is 3 super heavies. Okay. The other major thing here is this was played down in Tucson, Arizona. And one of the interesting things about this event was that 2/3 or more of the players at this event were at their first GT. None of them had ELO. Of the players that did have an ELO who had played at a GT before, the average ELO of players at this event was under 1,500, which doesn't happen. Like I don't think I've ever seen that before at a GT. Sometimes you'll see it at RTTs, but not at a GT. So I don't think the field was the strongest thing in the world for this one. Um, Now let's talk about things that were going in his favor. Are the something that was not in his favor and something that was in his favor. The first day was entirely on layout one, and one of the problems that you have on layout one is, especially because you're not playing Hammer the Emperor, is you don't have a ton of room. One of the major things that I will hear people talk about is you have like your castle, right? You have the two 6x12s that form the L where your home objective typically goes on basically everything except like hammer and anvil. Um, the spot on the right, or like the board edge, your board edge, like where you're normally playing on when you have your army on your left, um, it's very rare that super heavies fit there, but a lot of places will play that you can move super heavies there, and I don't know why. Because the biggest thing is that that spot is supposed to be about 6 inches wide from the board edge to the ruin that's like on the footprint, and the thinnest spot of a Baneblade with the sponsons is 7 inches. So you're not really supposed to have like super heavies go through there. You can't go through the center of like between those two L's because that's supposed to be like a knight base with just like 4.5 or like a little bit less than 4.5 inches wide. So they don't fit there. And the only place that you can have the move is going from the center of your deployment zone, where you can go off to the left towards your natural expansion, or you can move it towards like that super L, I call it the Angron pocket, where you can put a super heavy there. So it ends up getting caught quite a bit. Day 2 is played entirely on layout 6, which is like one of the perfect layouts to play super heavy on. So no further notes there. Um, now let's talk a little bit about how you can actually like play this list, and at least maybe some of the ideas behind it. One, it's a lot of toughness 13 2-up saves with 4-up invulns that are healing D3 every turn. So you do have, it is just a massive stat check that not every army can deal with. However, the problem is the armies that can deal with it, or the armies that can play in ways that where they don't have to deal with it, are a really big problem. Um, there's a couple cool things that you can do with the Super Heavy. The first one is because the Super Heavy is like 7 inches wide. Uh, an objective with the objective marker is like 7.2 or 7.3 inches across, so you can almost entirely cover an objective. And with the Hellhammer, I don't think it's a good super heavy, but the Hellhammer can shoot into combat. So if you can just run it forward, you can almost entirely block the center objective and demand that your opponent deal with you in ways that not every army really can. Um, then you have a Baneblade and a Shadow Sword, which are going to come out, and as long as you are careful with the way you're positioning your first wave, the Shadow Sword should be able to shoot a lot of things that are actually threats to the Super Heavies. The problem oftentimes becomes with this kind of list is it's very easy to pre-measure where the Shadow Sword and the Hellhammer and the Baneblade can get to. They are fast because they go, I think it's base 12 now. And you can make them move 15. So you can like pre-measure them reasonably effectively, but they are relatively fast tanks overall. And then it becomes, one, do you know how to deal with it? At an event where most of the players are not really used to playing competitive, a lot of them probably don't. And then the other big thing is, do you know how to play in ways where you don't have to deal with it? Some armies can't do that at all. But overall, Hayden was able to go 5-1 at this event, beating Tyranids, Raven Guard, losing to Drukhari, who ended up winning the event, and beating Space Wolves, Sisters, and Tyranids. Tyranids are definitely an army that didn't need to deal with the super heavies, so that's one of the things that I'm always looking at. Anyway, really interesting list. Glad it showed up. It was funny to read at the very least and see, like, wow, at the right event, you can make anything work. Anyway, congratulations to Hayden, and let's go ahead and move on. The next one, a bit of a funny list, is Patrick Greatbatch, who was our record setter last patch, because he showed up more times on that patch than any other player has shown up in a single patch since I've started taking a look at it. Patrick going 4-1. with another funny tank pile. It's a Cadian command squad, 3 Rogaldorn commanders, an Engineer, 1 unit of 10 Cadians, 2 units of 10 Catachan, 2 units of 5 Rough Riders, and 3 Rogaldorn battle tanks. That is 6 Rogaldorns. That is the most number of Rogaldorns you are legally allowed to take. And he has like, like if you were going to start a list with 6 Rogaldorns, I think this is pretty close to like an optimized 6 Rogaldorn list that you could take. You've got, 2 units of Catachan, 2 units of Rough Riders. They're going to run out and try and create space and demand that your opponent come play up against your 6 Rogaldorn battle tanks. And there are lists that can deal with like 2 or 3 Rogaldorn battle tanks fairly consistently. There are not a lot of lists that can consistently get through every single Rogaldorn. And because you're a little bit more everywhere on the board with the style of list that Patrick has, you aren't quite as easy to pre-measure because you can take control of so much more of the board all at the same time. Patrick ended up beating Blood Angels, Sisters, before losing to Sisters and beating Blood Angels twice. He played up against 2 different factions over 5 rounds at his GT. But anyway, congrats, Patrick. Hope you had a lot of fun pushing your tanks around. I'll see you again next time. All right. The rest of these are lists that don't really cleanly fit into any of the other categories that we talked about before. So let's go ahead and talk through them. First one, we have Hugo Bat, Octo Putre Solo, with a list name that had a lot of French references that I did not understand, but I'm glad they were funny to you, Hugo. 2 Cadian Castellans, 2 Cadian Command Squads, a Sign Command Squad, Nork Dead Dog, and Ogren Bodyguard, 2 Rogaldorn Commanders, 2 Chimera, 1 Torox, 2 units of 20 Cadians, 10 Catachan, 10 Krieg, 3 units of Khazarkin, and 5 Scions. I think this is close to like an optimized list in terms of trying to push this style. You have the 2 bricks of Cadians with Castellans that are very hard to deal with. You have the 2 Rogaldorn commanders that do a ton of damage. And then you have the Catachan and the Khazarkin, and this is just, if you want a list that just goes and fights people, this is about as close to an optimized just go fight people list that you can play. It does take a lot of time to move the Cadian Castellan bricks in person, but once you get used to doing that, you just fight. That's what this list does, and it does it really, really well. Hugo beat Dark Angels, lost to Necrons before beating Drukhari, Demons, and Death Guard for a 4-1 overall. I believe this is the first time we've seen Hugo pop up in these, but I know I talk to him fairly often, so congratulations on the 4-1. Next, going back over to the UK, we have Danny Evison, who started playing Guard like a couple of months ago, maybe 2 months ago at this point. Has had some decent success, showed up at ITT, has at least one other time that they've shown up in these videos, but it is a Cadian Command Squad, Gonskos, Lord Solar, 2 Rogaldorn Commanders, 10 Cadians, 5/5/5 Rough Riders, 5/5 Death Riders, an Armored Sentinel, 2 Hellhounds, a Leman Russ Exterminator, and 2 Leman Russ Vanquishers. This could have gone in another category. Like, this could have gone in, like, Funny Tank Pile. This could have gone in the 2 Dorns and 2 plus Vanquishers, but I think it kind of set itself apart because it is, you've got a lot of those pieces to just go play in the open with all the horses. And then you have the 2 Hellhounds, which are, again, Toughness 10, 2 up save bodies, obnoxious to remove. And it's just, like, you kind of take a look at this, and it's just a lot of stuff. The only thing I'm not really sold on is the Armored Sentinel. I've talked about it before. I think it is more of a liability than it is, like, itself good. And the big reason for this is because it is one model on a large base, a large circular base, so you can't screen with it super well, and it is against armies like Orcs or World Eaters or anything that has access to 6-inch pile and consolidate. It's not super hard to charge this and use it to swing charge into other things. So you do have to be very careful with the Armored Sentinel that you aren't giving your opponents cool opportunities with this. Overall, though, a lot of beef, a lot of T10 2+, and you're going to be able to play just about anything reasonably well. It will struggle a little bit against hordes, but otherwise it should go pretty good. Danny ends up beating Imperial Knights, Tau, Death Guard, Necrons before losing to Orcs in the last round at Manchester. That was Ben Jones, for what it's worth. All right, next at Black Crow versus 6+++, we have Harley Scully of 6++, and I believe also playing for Team England now, getting 3rd place with a Cadian Castellan, Cadian Command Squad, 3 Scion Command Squads, a Nork Dead Dog, an Ogren Bodyguard, Rogaldorn Commander, 3 Chimeras, 1 unit of 20 Cadians, 1 unit of 10 Catachan, 3 units of 10 Krieg, 3 units of Khazarkin, 2 units of 5 scions and 1 unit of 10 scions. Now, one of the big things about this is another thing that. Uh, so I'm going to mention Gustavo again here, but the thing to know about Gustavo is he loves to yap and he gets bored quickly. So he really, really loves looking at random stuff. He really, really loves um, coming up with these ideas, and then he will play like 5 games on it over the course of like 3 days and see what he thinks about it. And the thing that he's been on most recently is a Scion Command Squad with Nork Dead Dog and 10 Scions that you start on the board. I have played it. I'm still not convinced, especially on Games Workshop terrain, but it is something that you can clearly do. It is going to be playing kind of alongside that Cadian Cast and Brick with the 20 Cadians. It does some similar things. One of the major issues that it does have, though, is it doesn't have access to that fallback and shoot. However, it shoots way harder because you're hitting on 2s rerolling 1s instead of hitting on 4s rerolling 1s. Harley ends up taking this. It is a slight deviation because it has the 3 units of 10 Krieg instead of the 3 units of Krieg Engineers, which would have put it solidly into the Doombolt Guard, but it has a little bit more staying power because you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 med packs just kind of across the board, so you will kind of scam someone at some point. Harley ended up beating Ultramarines, Tau, Custodes, losing to Dark Angels before beating Custodes in the last round. So congrats to Harley, and hope you're enjoying your time with Guard. Okay, our last list, saving one that is pretty fun. We have Wes Roderick Polly showing up another time with Mechanized Assault at Geekfest Winter War. Yeah, let's get right into it. It's a Cadian Command Squad, a Catachan Command Squad, Gaunt's Ghosts, Lord Solar, 3 Scion Command Squads, 1 unit 10 Cadians, 4 Toroxes, 3 Torox Primes, 3 units of Kazarkin, 1 unit of 10 Krieg Engineers, 1 unit of 5 Ratlings, 3 units of 5 Scions, and a Scout Sentinel. Now, a couple things here that I'm kind of curious about. The first one, you have Cadian Command Squad, Lord Solar, and 10 Cadians. That's going to be standing in the backfield, right? I'm not sure what the Catachan Command Squad is doing. What my best guess is that it is going to be in either in reserve, or you find an opportunity to like move it into a Torox before you jump out of it later in order to get an extra order on like Scions or those Kazarkin in order to get the hitting on 2s part of like the equation. But it is going to be an army that does a really, really hard 1-2 punch. Your first wave, you send out your Kazarkin and your Krieg Engineers, and you kill everything in the midboard that your opponent is trying to skirmish with. Then, hopefully, you could do that with like 2 Toroxes and like 2 units of Kazarkin. Your second wave is you do the same thing with the other Kazarkin and the other Krieg Engineers that you're saving. If you still need more, the Torox Primes with the Scions are going to shoot incredibly hard. They're going to be hitting on 3s full rerolls with sustained, and then if your target's on an objective, it's full rerolls to wound. If it's not an objective, rerolling 1s to wound. So you're going to be hitting way harder than a lot of people are expecting with just these guard infantry. But it really is just understanding just that 1-2, sometimes that third punch that you're going to be going in with over the course of all the different Toroxes. This is the second time that Wes Roderick Polly has shown up with a very similar list. The first time I saw a list similar to this was with Robert Moreland taking it before Grizzle Company, and Robert has been playing a little bit more like super heavies and stuff like that. Anyway, Wes ended up beating Custodes, Blood Angels, Tyranids, Cast Knights before losing to Death Guard in the last round. So 1 game away, that final table, from getting that GT win. Overall, though, there's been a lot of fun stuff. If you were looking for lists, again, Double Dorn, 12 Bullgryn looks really good on UKTC or WC terrain. I'm a huge proponent of Doombolt Guard. I think it's one of the strongest styles of list you can play. It is a little bit more technically proficient than Dorn and Bullgryn lists, which are fairly straightforward, but a little bit less flexible. And then if you want to start playing combined again, people are doing it. People are having success with it. So if that's something you are interested in trying out, go ahead and give that a try. For now, though, we are over an hour on this one, so lots of lists, lots of stuff to talk about. We'll see you guys all next week. Have a good one. Bye-bye.